Hello, my name is Vincent. I'm a product manager at SquaredUp.
Hello, I'm Matthew. I'm a senior software engineer at Squared Up.
Hey, Matthew. Today we are going to talk about how to get started with monitoring in SquaredUp, but more importantly, how to turn your dashboards into actionable alerts. Matthew will spend as much time as possible to demo the product today. But before we do that, let's talk about some of the challenges we are going to be covering today. So dashboards are a powerful way to show and share data, as we all know. That could be an NOC, keeping an eye on systems, or for business stakeholders, we need to see status at a glance. But dashboards alone are not sufficient to react to problems. So today specifically, we look at two challenges and how SquaredUp can help. The first one is that no one can stay at a dashboard 24/7. So when something goes wrong, you need a way to know that immediately. You won't be able to rely on you looking at that dashboard and waiting for an issue to happen. And the second challenge we'll try and address today is that too often when if you badly configure your alert, that can overwhelm your teams with constant pings and basically making it hard to separate what's important from the noise. And that's the second challenge. We'll try and see how we can address it today: the alert storms and the noise. So what we're going to show you today is how to take the data you already have in your dashboard and make it actionable through monitoring and notifications in SquaredUp. Those will be two main areas of focus today. So let's start simple, I guess. When people think about monitoring, I guess the temptation is often to maybe switch everything on and see what you get. But in SquaredUp, we don't do that by default. That's something you'll need to sort of define based upon your needs. So how do we do that, Matthew? How do we go about enabling our first monitor?
Right, so let's jump to a dashboard. So I made this beautiful dashboard. I like staring at it 24/7, but unfortunately, not everyone in the team does. So I've got, as you can see here, we've had a bit of an issue the last day or two with some memory usage. People weren't looking at my dashboard, so they didn't notice. So ideally, we want to start monitoring this thing specifically. So as you mentioned, we don't turn everything on. You have to opt into what you want to try and reduce that sort of noise and tell us what values make sense for your app, because different metrics might have different thresholds depending on your use case. So if I edit this tile and go to the monitoring tab, I can turn on and enable monitoring for this particular tile. And what the config wants here is me to tell it how, based on the data we have, it should consider the health of this app and then how often it should check. So for example, here, I want to take the most recent value from the free memory column. Now, these drop downs are kind of semi-intelligent and they will usually try and auto-configure themselves. So here it's noticed that I've got data from more than one server coming in. So it's picked evaluate by server, which basically means it's going to group these performance metrics. And that's why in the preview, you can see I'm getting two different instances and it's got the most recent value for both. So that's all sort of worked out fine. We'll have some examples later where we have to adjust some of these things. So here I'm going to say I want two conditions, warning and error. I'm going to say it's going to be warning if the value is, let's say, over 80%, and it's an error if it's over 90%. Like, really common case here. There we go. And the preview is now showing that for those two instances, they are both currently green, as you can see. I can also, in the advanced here, just click and I can change how often we want to check this value. Now, the values you're going to be allowed to use here are depending on your tile's time frame. So if you're getting like, a month's worth of data, you probably don't want to be checking that every 1 minute. So therefore, we'll manipulate this list a bit to get a value that makes sense. For this particular case, I'm going to change this to check once an hour. Preview will be the same because it's obviously still computing on the most recent bit of data. And if I hit save now, what we'll see on this tile is we get a little green blip in a second. There we go. So now this tile is monitored and currently it's in a success state.
That's cool. That's our first monitor, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
So now we've got the first metric monitored. I mean, when I think about I guess an application or service, there is usually more than one thing that I care about. In that case, I care about the specific metric for now, but But of course, it's not much use if I only see it when I come back to the dashboard, right? So
Yeah,
I really want to be notified on this one to start with, and probably more metrics I want to be notified about. But this one specifically, if
right.
it turns
Yeah,
red, then how do I know about it? Where
yeah.
because probably my workflow, I mean, my use case, maybe I might be living on, maybe on could be on Teams, my team might be on Teams or Slack, maybe Service. Now I don't know. There could be many cases where I'd like those to be alerted. So how do I do that, Matthew?
Right. Okay, so now we can go to the monitors tab for this workspace, and we'll see a list of all the monitors. As you mentioned, this is our first one for this workspace, so not a lot in here right now, but I can add notification rules. And these let the product respond to the health of monitors and actually do something about it. So we've got multiple different trigger settings. So I'm just going to go in here quickly and pop this one onto a specific monitor. Let's say I don't want to send every future monitor possibly to a team. It's just this memory one we care about for the moment. So I'm going to turn on just that one. And then I can pick a destination, those notification rules, when they're triggered to go to. So in this particular case, you mentioned my engineering team for this app are all on Teams. If I go into Teams, I have previously added a Teams integration. I can go and add a new one in and pop the details in, but for now I'm just going to use the existing one just to save time. So that existing infrastructure team will now get, whenever this monitor changes health state from success to warning to critical and back and forth, they'll now get notified of that. And I can go and configure, multiple different notification rules, targeting different things to get the right alerts to the right people, regardless of which destinations they're using. So as you saw, we've got quite a few there. So we can do email, Teams, Slack, there's loads.
Cool. So the infrastructure team will be alerted when the memory on that virtual machine goes below or above the threshold that you've set. So that's
Exactly.
cool. That's nice for that single metric. So now let's try and think about an application or service. There may be usually more than one thing you care about. That could be cost, performance, as we've just seen, but cost, maybe availability, maybe a metric that's more like sort of higher level, and so on. So how do we go beyond just monitoring that one metric and maybe start modeling the overall health maybe of an application or a service?
That's a great question. And it is sort of an important one to consider because it's very easy to just do what I've just done 30 times, create a whole bunch of different monitors, put a rule in that's like, when anything happens, send it through to the engineering team, and you're straight into that sort of alert storm noise kind of problem, right? So instead, like you say, we've got to think about what we're going to enable and potentially have a set of notifications and monitors that are more aimed at providing that overall health. And we do that in a couple of ways, actually. So let's sort of start out on this dashboard here with the sort of active incidents. If an incident is declared, especially if multiple P1 incidents occur, we probably want to notify people about that particular case. So I'm going to go in here and enable monitoring for this tile. Now, what this tile is actually doing is getting the list of all incidents, and then it's being configured to count them, which is fine. We're getting that with the scalar tile. However, we do need to tell monitoring that's also the case as well, because it's seeing the raw data that's coming back here. So I want to change here. Need to make sure this drop down is set to count and not top or sum or mean. So count here now means just count the number. Don't look at the value, just count the number of results, which in this case is 3. So we've got 3 different ones coming in here. And I've set, let's say we'll have a warning turned on if there's 1, and we'll have a error if there's more than that. Let's put that on. Let's turn the warning off and just go straight to the warning. There we go. So we've got more than one current P1 alert. So if I save that one, that tile is going to now go red. And a feature of the scalar tile actually is that it colorizes itself based on the monitor. So we get that, which is quite cool. But I also want to sort of track how we're looking from like a cost perspective as well. Is the app currently running to cost? Because that might be a sign that there's some kind of issue if it's suddenly much cheaper or much more expensive than we're expecting it to be, especially with auto scaling turned on. So I've got 2 tiles here. I've got a last month and this month. For this demo, I'm just going to enable it on this month and set like a static threshold. But there are some advanced features, and we'll talk about later, that I could use to probably make this a bit more accurate and a bit more intuitive. So let's go and turn this on. So we've only got one column. It's the cost column. and we're going to say if it costs more than, well, 0, it's definitely going to cost more than 0. Let's say if it costs more than 150. If I put enough zeros in, that's the question. Yeah, 150,000. There we go. So if it goes over that number, it's going to trigger that. And I'm going to change the frequency at 12 hours. Yeah, 12 hours is probably good enough, especially because my cost API probably isn't giving me, in fact, maybe it's only doing once a day anyway, so I'll change it to daily. It doesn't use up as many data queries that way. So I can save that now. So that's the cost done. And I'm also going to do, let's do the state on these tiles over here. So if we edit this one quickly, the other option we've got, it's quite easy with monitoring, is I can change it to type state. Again, this will happen for you a lot of the time because it knows this is a state tile. So I'm going to use the state column, which provides health information directly from the data source. And that just rolls that up, basically. So I can just say here, yep, check this every, let's say 5 minutes, check this nice and frequently. And as long as one of them is in an error state, this whole tile goes in error state. You'll notice that it is doing the aggregate here. So if any one of them goes red, this tile goes red. Here we go. Right, so now we've got the cost, the incidents, and the components. So that's really providing a nice sort of high-level health state for this app. Like anyone who's using this particular app now, these 3 metrics do inform the health, even if I haven't turned on every little individual metric number. And also, if there's a future problem we haven't seen before that's not covered by a particular performance metric, it's likely that one of these places will sort of shake that out. Now, what you can see is that in addition to the tiles having a health, the dashboard also has a health now. It's rolling up the health of these monitors. And because we've got 1 green and 2 red, it's saying, well, the worst health state here is red. So I'm going to roll it up to the overview. And actually, if you look at the nav, you can see that the workspace itself has also gone red now as well. It's rolling up all the dashboards into itself. And what that means is I could use dashboards or workspaces to model the health of my app overall and say, yeah, this dashboard or this workspace represents the overall health. It contains monitors that are only looking at those sort of top level or all-inclusive sort of metrics. And then I can set notifications up on that dashboard or on that workspace, those dashboard monitors or that overall workspace. And maybe that's what I feed to the service desk, or that's what I feed to downstream systems that depend on me. They don't care about the minutiae of a particular performance metric. They can now see it, get an overall health picture from that single value and be like, oh, this app is currently experiencing some kind of problem. And maybe I do or don't need to know the details, and I can come and drill into those dashboards and workspace if I do.
Right. So if our boss cares about the status of our demo application, and not really the underlying details, they'll be notified when demo goes red. They'll probably have a little message that tells them why. In that case, that could be number of P1 incidents has exceeded 10 or 3 or whatever. Cool. Nice. So obviously, what you've shown, Matthew, is how we can monitor multiple sort of aspects of an application. You've gone through performance, cost, could be anything really, but being able to combine all of those in that single health view, especially the roll-up feature, I guess, which will help us cut through the noise, as we just mentioned, just focusing on what's important. We will be diving much deeper into rollups in a separate session where you'll see how you can configure rollups across dashboards, folders, and workspaces, again, to get that clear picture of your environment. But for the purpose of this session, monitoring and notification, I mean, specifically about notification rules, Matthew, you've talked about that quite a bit. I'd like to see more of them. I'm intrigued by the flexibility and the setting there. It looks like I can use the notification rules to define my own routing, routing of alerts. I've seen additional settings on like things like a repeat notification. That sounds intriguing to me. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, so it's quite flexible, and the idea is that you can, as I said, can just put one notification rule in that says if any monitor triggers, fire an alert, but that tends to be quite noisy. So the first thing we can sort of configure, the 2 halves of this, is triggers. So we can trigger on everything, or we can say, well, actually, maybe I only want the ones that live on that overview dashboard. Like you say, it's providing a specific like view of health to an audience, and I don't want every single new monitor that's enabled in the workspace to automatically go to them, or it's providing a certain view, or maybe I just put it on the workspace itself and say, actually, if the workspace state changes, without giving them all the extra detail of what's gone wrong, I can just say this has now changed to red. This is now back to healthy, which is you said what some stakeholders want. Typically, your boss's boss's boss doesn't really care about the disk space metric. They care about is the app up or down, and that's all they want to know. They'll come and shout at you if they want to know more. So I've got that sort of option. The other thing I can do, so let's say I turn those on, is I can also configure repeat notifications. So let's, for argument's sake, I'm going to stick this into a distribution, because I've sent this to a distribution group. So happy to know that's the email address. There we go. It's not a real email address, but you get it. So now I've got some additional options here. So including an image of the tile notification, if it's the right kind of channel that supports it, and like Teams, Slack, email, they all do support this option, will include a screenshot at the time notification was taken. It was raised in the email body. And that makes it super easy, from the tool that you're living in, like in your Slack message. I don't necessarily have to come to the dashboard now to see the context. I can be, oh, okay, I can see exactly what's going on. It's especially useful, like I say, in those sort of tiles where you've got multiple pieces of information showing, oh, I can see the state of one component's gone red, but 5 others also have. Okay, I know it's like some kind of cascading failure now. Oh, it's just a single box. That's probably just a problem on that individual server. I'll log onto that server and take a look. The other option we've got here is to use a shared dashboard link. So if the dashboard has been shared using our sharing feature, so it's available to users who don't have a license, but they can just click on a non-interactive version, we'll include that in the message. And what that means then potentially is that if you go back to my memory screen dashboard for a second, I could configure a monitor, on every single tile here, and then when they get that through, it comes through to the one tile. But often you need to see that in context of all the data to understand really what's going on. So it's quite nice to include that shared dashboard link, and then someone can look at it and say, okay, memory's high. Oh, but CPU is also high, and also the cost is really high. This is going to be this kind of problem versus, oh, that's weird. Actually, the memory's high, but CPU is okay, and the cost is way down. Oh, someone's changed the scale set and they've made it so that it's now running on a really cheap set of landers, and that's why there's no memory available anymore. So you can kind of get extra data from that, which can be kind of handy.
And I guess Matthew,
the other one.
So I'm just going to cut you. I just got an alert. We've got 2 minutes left on this webinar,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I guess the repeat notification is the last setting. Is one where I guess if I want to make sure an alert, I don't miss an alert, or my team doesn't miss an alert, I'll just be reminded at an interval. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can have a fixed interval or recurring one. So for the next 5 hours, keep bugging me every hour until I fix it, basically.
That's really cool.
Quite good for those sort of ones in busy channels.
Cool. All right. There's so much to talk about. I think it's probably time to wrap up. I think we've got a little extra slide we can probably cover very quickly on some advanced things you can do with monitoring. I don't know. Do you want to spend maybe about a minute on this one, Matthew? Just to
Yeah, I'll go through these. So there's 2 additional sort of options we've got, which is custom monitoring scripts and the SQL Analytics tile, and they're quite useful when it comes to monitoring. So I mentioned my 2 cost tiles, right, where I had cost last month and cost this month. So custom monitoring scripts are useful for when you want to do some quite bespoke logic that's not available to you in our sort of simple dropdown. So for example, well, I want to set a threshold for cost, but that threshold number differs as the month goes on, right? Day 1 of the month, I don't expect to spend very much. By the end of the month, I expect to have spent a lot. So you can use custom monitoring scripts to say, compare how far through we are in the month, what day of the month it is, to then compute the threshold. So that's how you could use that. SQL Analytics is really useful when you want to join 2 bits of separate data together. So for example, I don't care about the actual number of how much we've spent, but I care that it's similar to last month. It's not jumping up massively. I want to look at the delta. So I could use SQL Analytics to get last month's value and this month's value and glue them together. And then I could monitor on that delta rather than just on, a threshold value that over time, as we're being more successful, our cost goes up because usage goes up. The other thing is, if you've looked at this and thought, oh, that's great, but how do I do like on-call rotors, and how do I do really in-depth alert routing? And we've already got all that configured in a separate product anyway. Well, I've got custom webhook notification channels, so you can just send this event off to whatever alert routing product you're already using and integrate that with your existing workflows, rather than sort of like need squared up to implement everything you've already done. And then also we have a notification API as well, so you can send notifications on a schedule, for example, or using whatever logic that you might need. So we have customers, for example, who are scripting that themselves. They're using their own automation or a scheduled task or something to say 9 a.m. Monday morning, go and send out a bunch of notifications for these dashboards or these tiles, so the team can see what the alert status looks like, or the incident status counts look like before their morning meeting, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of power and flexibility here. Yeah.
Nice, and we are seeing also used a lot by customers as well, which everyone needs that flexibility, as you say. That's cool. Right, I'm afraid it's time to wrap up, but really just to say, dashboards they do remain the central place to visualize and share data in SquaredUp, but they really become far more powerful when you combine them with alerting. So hopefully that was useful to everyone. Thanks for joining. We've got resources that you can probably on the next slide, Matthew, resources that we can you can learn more of about monitors, notification rollup, and advanced features. But really the best way to use it is to sign up at squaredup.com. We've got a free tier. You can experience monitors and notifications. All right, thanks a lot, Matthew. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys.